Now, it's probably an understatement to say that the Middle East or West Asia is in turmoil. One can think of stronger words to describe what's going on there. But even a cursory snapshot reveals the variety of challenges that the region is confronted with right now. The horrific rise of the Islamic State, also known as Daesh, a loose acronym of Al-Dawla al-Islamiyya, al-Iraq, al-Sham. The ongoing upheaval brought about by the so-called Arab Spring, Iran's nuclear and regional ambitions, proxy wars, notably in Syria and Yemen, the unsettled Palestinian question, cross-border terrorism, long-established regimes in transition, and unstable oil prices. And at a recent conference in Doha, organized by our colleagues from the Brookings Doha Center, three issues in particular stood out as being pressing. The first was the military, political, and social challenges posed by Daesh. Second, the implications of a nuclear deal with Iran. And third, the perceived role of extra-regional hegemon, in this case, notably the United States, and the sense that, the impression of the US ranged from one of being indifferent to the region, basically detaching from it, or being in utter confusion about its policy. And that's one of the things we'll talk about a little bit as well. Now, of course, the region is also home to roughly about 7 million Indians, and the Persian Gulf supplies about 2/3 of India's oil and gas. Additionally, the region has also emerged as one of India's largest trading partners and supplier of defense equipment when you think about Israel, which, by the way, is also part of that region. Now, the fate of that region, therefore, is very much linked to India's strategic interests and future. And yet, the Indian government, until now, has really not acted upon its Link West policy. In fact, in the first year of the government, it's really been more reactive rather than proactive. It's only acted when Indians have got kidnapped or held hostage, or has extracted Indians from, the situation in Yemen. But I think that's likely to change with the forthcoming visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Israel. And I think this is going to put a very particular spotlight on the government's approach to the region, and will certainly be keenly watched. To discuss this and the ongoing turmoil in the Middle East, and to address the challenges and implications, particularly for Indian interests in the region, we really have a dream panel. And I'm delighted to introduce them briefly before I join them and start up the conversation. And in order that they'll speak, first of all, we have Sultan Barakat, who is the Director of Research at the Brookings Doha Center and a Senior Fellow in the Center for Middle East Policy at Brookings. But prior to that, Sultan has had a very rich and varied experience doing a number of research projects where he's really focused on state fragility and recovery in the Middle East. And he's worked on that issue with the World Bank, the European Union, for which we'll forgive him, the United Kingdom Department of International Development, the Office of UN High Commission on Refugees, the International Institute of International Education, the USIP, just to name a few. So we're delighted to have you here with us. Second, we have Professor Gulshan Deetal, who really doesn't need very much introduction to anybody in India who's worked on the Middle East. But presently, she is the Indian Council of Social Sciences Research Senior Fellow affiliated with the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. And she's working on a project on pipelines, but really the geopolitics of that. And of course, Professor Deetal's writings and works are legendary and too numerous to list here, but I'll just list three of them. Contemporary Saudi Arabia, the emerging Indo-Saudi relations, and for the purposes of our discussion today, democracy and democratization in the Gulf. Then we have Kadira Pethyagor from Australia, but now a visiting fellow at the Brookings Doha Center. And his focus very much has been on the cultural dimensions of diplomacy and foreign policy. And he's doing a very interesting project in the Brookings Doha Center on India's relations with the Gulf states, and it will draw on experience in India's foreign policy, spanning both policy making and academia. And last but not least, the one key practitioner on the panel is Ambassador Pinak Chakravarti. He is presently a distinguished fellow at the Center for International Relations, Observer Research Foundation here in New Delhi. But prior to that, of course, he served at the Ministry of External Affairs and in Indian mission abroad as ambassador, including in Cairo, Jeddah, London, and Karachi. And again, in addition to that, he also speaks Arabic, so very much a deep insight and lots of hands-on experience of the region. So with that, let me move to the panelists and join them there as well.